We did, so we have some stuff, but I was filling council.
Okay. Well, I think it's 5:30. Is HPA-TV ready for us?
Yes,
Okay.
Gil texted we're live.
All right, great. All right, then we're live. So let's go. All right, good evening, everyone. And welcome to the Virtual Planning, Economic Development and Housing Committee. We call it VDH. Today is Wednesday, March 5th, 2024. The committee meeting is being broadcast on HPA TV Comcast and Frontier Government Channel 96 on 6032. The meeting is also streamed on hpatv.org, HPA TV Facebook page, HPTA TV Roku, Apple, Amazon, and TV app. Also, the committee can also, meeting can also be watched and rebroadcast and available on HPA TV YouTube channel. I'm now calling the meeting to order. The members of the committee here, we have my co-chair, Councilman John Gale, Majority Leader Marilyn Rossetti, Councilwoman Amilcar Hernandez, Councilman Josh Mitchum, and am I missing anyone else? I think we've got it all. Okay. We also have our attorney from the EDH meeting, Attorney Richard Salo. And we also have other individuals from the administration. We've got several items on the agenda. Can I ask the committee to take one of the items out of order, items 2.3, due to the fact that we won't be picking this item up because there is going to be a public hearing on March 17th, 2025 at 7 p.m. So could I have a motion to table that item until the next committee meeting?
Motion to postpone.
Second.
Motion has been properly second. For any discussion? Seeing or hearing no discussion. Those in favor of postponing items 2.3 until our next PDNH committee meeting. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstention? The ayes have it, and that item 2.3 will be postponed due to, again, there's a public hearing on this ordinance on March 17th, 2025 at 7 p.m. So the first item on the agenda that we're going to take up is item 2.1. The item is a resolution from the mayor, Arulampalam, authorizing the city to accept a grant from the City of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development, Office of Brownfield Remediation and Development. Who do we have from the administration to speak on that item?
Hey, Council President William Diaz, Project Leader,
Okay.
Economic Development. How are you
Good
doing?
evening, Mr. Diaz, and I do also see the esteemed DDS Director, Mr. Walker, is also here with us.
Yes, I am.
Good evening, Mr. Walker. Hope everything is well. And that's it. So, Mr. Diaz, you will be speaking on that item. Please go ahead. You have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you. The DDS put in a grant application through DECD to do assessment on several city-owned properties that had potential development opportunities. So we were awarded through DECD the assessment dollars, and these are for different parcels: 7377 Homestead Ave, which is a city-owned parcel, currently undergoing a homestead area study. We expect to get a draft of that study sometime in late April or May. Hopefully, we can finalize that by June, which will dictate what's the best use of that property. So we're asking for we're gonna engage a LEP to do a phase 1 and maybe a hazmat study on the building. Also, 92 Walnut Street, which is a property that the city's transferring over to the House of Bread. So when they started going through the property, they realized that there was additional assessment work that needed to be done. We also have 188, 194 Capon Street. We actually have a LOI with the Barber Renaissance District. They want to build a, digital inclusion center on that site. Then there's other properties, 7 Barber Street, 57 Barber Street, and 127 Nelson Street are also under LOI with the Barber Renaissance, and we're looking for phase 2 environmental studies, and they're looking to transform those to residential.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Diaz? Okay, go ahead, Co-Chair.
Councilman Gill?
Dale.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Diaz. Thank you, Madam Chair. So you mentioned phase 1 and phase 2 in different times when you were talking. So do I understand that this 162,000 is going to be paying in some cases for a phase 1 study and in some cases for a phase 2?
That is correct. The properties on Barber Street and Capon Street already had phase 1s, and those studies dictated that we do a phase 2 on those. 73, 77 Homestead, which is the old print shop, there hasn't been any studies on those, so we want to do a phase 1 and also a hazmat for that. And 92 had that building was demolished and it had phase 1s in the past, and the building had hazmat investigations, but it justifies additional studies. So yeah, the assessment grant were specific. We were specific on what we wanted to do with each parcel.
So how does this work in terms of, my experience is that, phase 2 is a more expensive study. Oftentimes these run $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and they may very well come back and say, well, this needs to be remediated and that needs to be remediated, and the cost for the remediation is going to be dramatically higher than the costs for these assessments. So is there any guarantee or pathway for getting the money to now do the remediation once we get the results of the phase 2s and on these things?
Well, Councilman, these are just assessment grants. But that's exactly what we're trying to figure out. What are the next steps? Maybe, since we do have LOIs and all these properties except for 73 have developers looking into them. We want to assess what are the remediation costs so they can see if we can incorporate those into the development, into the pro forma of the development project. Or if they are too large, like I know, for example, the Capon Streets was a car shop, for example. So we have probably oil spills and things to that nature. It might justify going after additional grant dollars, but we just want to get that dollar amount right now.
So does this mean that in some cases, once you know the results of the phase 2, it's going to be put to the developer? Well, here it is. You
Correct.
can take it as is, and you can incur the costs as necessary to do the development?
Correct. Like we've done that in other projects. For example, we had environmental studies when we had the Arrowhead project. We submit that with the RFP many of times, and they hire their own LEP to go over the data. But then that cost is then incorporated into the redevelopment of the project.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from the council members? Seeing none. My only question, Mr. Diaz, is you said these are all city-owned properties, and because you have an interest from developers,
Correct.
that's how the properties were chosen?
That's how the properties were chosen. These are the ones that have more, potential to move forward more rapidly.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Any other questions? Seeing or hearing other question, or may I have a motion?
Move to send this back to council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
A motion has been made and properly second to send this item back to the overall council meeting on a favorable recommendation. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Great, seeing and no abstention. The favor have it. This will be sent back to this item was sent back to the council with a favorable recommendation. Next item on the agenda is item 2.2. Again, it's a resolution from Mayor Arulampalam, authorizing the budget for the renovation project, currently underway at Blue Hills Community Center. And whom from the administration be speaking on this item?
That'll also be me, Council President.
Hey, Mr. Diaz, boy, we have you all evening to ourselves. All right, sir, go right ahead, please.
Yeah, so this is a tough one, right? So this is a project that we started initially trying to renovate the Blue Hills Center, which was abandoned for many years, had excessive water damage. There was a lot of issues that were found out after the fact, after we did the interior demolition. So just talk about the bigger changes in the project. For example, the wood framing had to be completely replaced. We were hoping to salvage a lot of it, but a lot of it was dry rotted, mold infested, and until we couldn't get into the area until we demoed the ceiling. So basically, that there had to be how do you call it? We couldn't just take the wood down one by one because the building would collapse. So we had to figure out a way where we can remove part of it while keeping intact. So the whole wood framing had to be replaced. Also, out in the back, we were moving the basketball court to the back of the property. So when we requested some of the tree removals, that way the tree roots were not damaged, the new basketball court, they were next to the retaining walls, and the area has been unkept for several years, so the roots were damaging the retaining walls. So that was another large change order to replace the retaining walls on the back area of the site. Then also there was some of the masonry in some parts of the building that were not reinforced with steel beams. So those have to be there's beams inside the concrete, and there were some areas that didn't have those beams. So those have to be replaced to make sure that the building is reinforced. And then on top of that, there's also additional, the project's taking maybe a year longer than it should have. So there's the insurance costs and the holding costs from the contracting company.
Is that it, Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to talk up because, be honest with you, Mr. Diaz, I've been involved with this project up in Blue Hills. The community really wanted us to see this project. Pursuant to the resolution, we have spent so far, of the total project is $2.8 million. I think that's what the resolution said.
I
Was it?
think not spent, but we were contracted up to 2.8. I think that.
So then this is an additional 750,000.
Correct.
So, and for how many square feet is this building?
It's pretty small. Bear with me one second.
And while you're looking for that, how much has been spent to date? I mean, what the cost is this, but how much has been spent to date?
How much has been spent to date? We have spent roughly it's like 1.2 with the contractor itself. Then there's also soft costs involved. There was a previous contract for the abatement work that has already been done on the project, because there was hold on a second.
Well, you look, let me
Yeah.
just tell the other council members, that is that rec center, the corner, if anybody knows where that's located on
And
Tower.
Council President, didn't this start like 2.5 years ago?
Yes, ma'am. Been such a long time. And, we keep, I didn't, every time they open up another wall, something else is found. And that's the only reason I asked what's the square feet, because if you have spent about 1.2 million already, the total project is going to cost about 3.4 mil. Does it make sense to keep going with this? Just, it's just amazing for a small building that size.
Yeah, what's the square feet, Mr. Diaz? Sorry, Council President.
No, I'm
That's
trying, yeah, bear with me. I'm trying to get the actual square footage.
Okay.
Councilwoman, I'm looking at a June 2022 press release that
was
describes
four.
the property as being 4,500
That's-
square feet. It also describes the project at that time as being a $1.6 million project.
Exactly.
So that's like, Council
1.6
President, that's like
million.
$800 or $900 a square foot,
Really?
something like that. I mean,
I
if
just
it's
did the math. It's $792
Okay.
per square foot.
800, yeah. So
So
that's crazy.
sorry. So the $1.6 million was the initial budget that was allocated to the project before anyone was hired, right? That's when the city said we have $1.6 million. What can we do with the project? By the time our drawings were done, our estimate was closer to $2 million. When we put the project out to bid and we awarded it, we're already up to $2.2 million. So even before we started, we're not looking at the 1.6, we're actually looking at the 2.2, which is what was awarded. We spent 120K or so for the abatement work that was done by Stanford. Wrecking, we had the LEP consultant, which is a little bit over $30,000. Then we also have the design with Crosskey Architects, which initially was around $300,000. But then every time there's a change to the project, you do have those soft costs also for redesign work and and then also the contracting work to be done. So it's at this point, it's everything inside the building. It's being replaced. We're basically keeping the exterior masonry to an extent, because some of it is also being replaced because of its conditions.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
President?
Yes, please go ahead, Mr. Mitchum. Councilman
So,
Mitchum. I'm frustrated.
Following up really on, I feel like what Council President's concerns are, I guess the question is if we feel like we just keep going into this and we spend more money, and we're into it to the tune of 2 mil and change at this point, is there a cheaper way out other than leaving the building derelict? Like, can you knock it down and then do something else, build a whole new one? I mean, I don't know. I don't know the first thing about the cost involved, but it's unfortunate that we're at this point that we're at where we've sunk a lot of money into it, but it would be useful to know, are there alternatives that are a little more certain in terms of their outcome and that limit costs? I don't know if you can, Mr. Diaz, that might be, you might have to come to us with that.
Yes. We actually looked into that maybe last summer when some of these bigger change orders started coming in. It's one of the, we've already invested so many dollars into it that, then to start from scratch and demoing the building and redesign the building, it's going to be even more expensive at this point. Honestly, that's an option that should have been considered before we started the project.
Anybody? Go ahead, Councilman Hernandez.
And this question is mostly, as more of a learning experience, for future projects similar to this. There was no study done at the beginning that could have warned us that this was a possibility, that more of these issues could arise, and now we are over $2 million over, the original award of of the 2.2, then we're basically 1.4 more. Was there any study that could have bring these concerns up earlier? Because now in retrospective, now we're saying, oh, we should have done X, Y, and Z. But was there any tool and resources earlier that could have helped us make this determination earlier, as opposed
Yeah,
to us looking back and, well, there's no
yeah,
reason.
I think the starting a project with a budget instead of trying to figure out what needs to be done, going in saying, hey, what can I do for 1.6 versus what do we really need to do to get this done, right? What's a complete needs analysis. So we were trying to salvage more, like for example, some of the framing, we didn't think that we needed, we didn't want to replace it because we were trying to be cost efficient up front and saying, okay, we can save some of this wood, which, once you start the project and more water started getting in there, realized that that was not the case. And then while we were pursuing other funding sources, the project was put on hold, which, when these buildings are open to the conditions, they deteriorate pretty quickly. From the first time I walked in the building, was it 2021 to maybe 12 months later, it was a complete different building from all the water damage that was going in on there. But we are, talking on other projects that working with Paul and Public Works. We are looking at different alternatives. For example, the like the firehouse that went out to bid on Sigourney. So we're looking at different, instead of saying, okay, instead of investing X amount of dollars, can we build a new building elsewhere? So those are the approaches that we're looking at going forward on projects.
Council President.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I don't want to belabor this, and Mr. Diaz, this isn't and I mean, it's done now, but why would we let a building that we're working on deteriorate to that point? Why would we do that? Why wouldn't it be, shored up so the elements didn't do that? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm thinking of it too simplistically.
Yeah, it was, this is before I'm saying when we hired the architect to look at it before the project was officially taken off. We had the needs assessment. At that point, when Charles was here, they pitched it to the neighborhoods. Hey, we want to demo this and put a park here. And they said, no, we want the rec center. And just that whole period before moving forward, it was a change from when we first went in there to when we actually started the project. And unfortunately, a lot of the assumptions that were made, like assuming that there were steel beams, and then once you start doing the interior demolition of the walls inside, and you see the actual conditions of some of the wood that was in there.
I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Diaz. I'm reluctant to keep going like this because I'm just going to be honest. As you get in and you keep doing more, are we going to discover anything else again, or is this it?
I don't think there's anything left inside. Like I said, it was unfortunately it was in horrible shape. Many of the when I walked the building with many of the contractors pre-bids, they're asking why are we trying to salvage this building, and this was just the directions that we were given was, but I think like everything else inside is being replaced, so there's not much, and even outside, like the retaining walls, that's not something that was being considered up front because it's not in the building. But for safety purposes, when you start looking at the walls and you're going to have children playing basketball, next to a wall that's cracking and leaning one way, it's just not.
So basically, a 4.5 square feet building is going to cost us about 3.4 million.
Correct.
Well, Council President, I share your sentiments, but at this point, with the amount of money that has already been invested and with the limited possibilities of any alternative, I probably would like to move this, make a motion to send this back with a favorable recommendation, as reluctantly as we may be, only because there's no other alternative at this point. but to just finish the project, and and with the confidence that Mr. Diaz has, that no other issues will arise, because there's nothing else to really look at anymore in that building. At this point, and this money is coming from a reserve account, so it doesn't really hit our profit and loss statement. So I will just move to send this back with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Motion has been properly made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no more discussion. Those in favor of sending this resolution back with a favorable recommendation to the council? Those in favor?
I,
Aye.
I'm reluctantly voting aye. Those opposed? Seeing none, no abstention. The ayes have it. The items would be sent back to the council with a favorable recommendation. Thank you for wrapping this up, Mr. Diaz. I appreciate it, for everything that you do.
Thank you all.
Okay, so next item on the agenda is item 2.4. This is a resolution from Councilman Mitchum calling the state of Connecticut to revise the approach of the Greater Hartford Mobility Study. Mr. Mitchum, Councilman Mitchum, I'm gonna have you, since it's your resolution, open the floor up for you, and let's see who else is here to speak on behalf of this resolution. I know we did also invite the Department of Transportation. I see Mr. Kevin Burnham here. Can't think of anyone else. We also have been joined by Councilwoman Rosado. So I'm gonna let you start off, Councilman Mitchell, since this is your resolution.
Thank you, Council President. I mean, again, it's again, like I said, maybe the first time around or when I wrote it, it's a non-binding resolution. It's just, and I'm gonna ask Chance Carter from our planning and zoning to speak, but of course we'll also hear from DOT because they are here.
Yes.
You know what I'll do is let's hear from them first, and then I can talk about it.
Okay, great.
I think that makes more sense, and I don't care. It's your meeting, so whatever order you want to go in.
Well, since this is your resolution, I was giving you the respect to you, sir.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome, sir. We have Kevin Burnham from the Department of Transportation. One of the things I know Councilman Co-Chair Gale over the last year or so. Hello, there you go. You're trying to share your. Go ahead, Mr. Burnham.
Okay, good evening. Like said, I'm Kevin Burnham. I'm with the Department of Transportation. I was the project manager of the Greater Hartford Mobility Study. But tonight we're going to go over a study overview, talk about our implementation plan, look at some of the active projects that have been started under this plan, and then look at the long-term recommendations. So this, process started quite a ways back. I was actually still working with the city of Hartford at the time when this project started, and it started out of looking at a piece of infrastructure that the I-84 viaduct that needed to be repaired, and we were challenged by the community to look at this not just to repair that piece of infrastructure, but to repair the damage that infrastructure has done to the city by dividing it. And as we began a extensive and detailed public involvement process, we looked at a number of other initiatives that the department is doing, including the Connecticut Fast Track, the Hartford Line Service, and East Coast Greenway, and a lot of the feedback that we were getting through the public engagement process over this period, that we really needed to look more broadly at this. And so that's how we came to start the mobility study. And that study, obviously in its name, it's about mobility, but that, was certainly not what we felt was the end in itself. we have here in the vision about enhancing the quality of life, the economic vitality and opportunity of the region. And with that, these goals, we again looking for the movement of people and goods, but we want to do that in a way that these transportation options are available to everybody in all modes and being accessible and reliable and safe options. And while we want to accommodate these future needs, we want to see that we are making sure that social equity and environmental impacts are always kept in mind. From that, we developed this universe of alternatives, which was over 100 different options, ideas, and that we wanted to see how to put in play for this. Some of them were service and operations for the transit system, and some of them were some policy changes, and many of them were the traditional capital projects across all different modes, from the roads to the bikes to other things. We then took these through a screening process. We first saw that they were meeting a mobility need for one of these modes, one or more of these modes, saw that they were satisfying one or more of the study goals, and see that they were practical to implement, they were feasible, that they had a economic return, and they were compatible with the other elements of the program that we were going to put together. We were, again, when this project started, we were challenged by a little bit by the pandemic and the lack of ability to get out there in the public in the way that we had been doing. And so we created this virtual collaboration portal. And while that was very effective, we did find that we were missing some things. So when we got the opportunity to get back into public meetings, in-person meetings, we started to do all this engagement that you see here, from meeting with community groups and NRZs, pop-up events. We also engaged the voices of women of color to do some very intense grassroots organization and detailed meetings with the public. That through that process, we came up with an implementation program that has a number of different layers. You've probably seen different things about the longer term components, but there are a number of near term and midterm actions that we have as well. In the near term, we have already started to initiate a number of these early action projects, and a lot of them are related to different active transportation elements. We see, I won't go through them all, but just to give you a sense, we heard a lot of feedback about how people had difficulty crossing highway ramps. So we are doing a project now to do pedestrian improvements at ramps throughout Hartford and East Hartford. Pulaski Circle, a gateway into downtown from the Whitehead Highway. It's right now people go through that are high speeds. We want to see about slowing them down, make it easier for pedestrians to cross. And there's other ones here that you see relate to that same type of active transportation and complete streets agenda. Looking back at the more core program, this is a look at from Asylum Hill, looking towards downtown. North is to the left. We have kind of Union Station area in the center there. And this is really illustrates how the feedback that we got from the public was so important, as this kind of lowered highway option that kind of became the consensus of the stakeholders was really born out of an idea that was brought up by the public about what would we do if we could move the rail out of the way to the west. And that did open up a lot of options with being able to lower the highway And then by capping over both the highway and the rail, we'd be able to connect Asylum Hill with downtown. You'll also see there towards the lower right side going through the center is that fast track alignment through that goes into the old corridor of I-84. And also, as we move north, next slide, you'll see we also, again, continuing where, just to orient us here, now we are looking with still north to the left. We're looking towards the river with downtown at the right. We have the stadium, Capitol Prep, and Albany and Maine kind of there in the center. And again, we co-locate the highway and the rail line and cover that over, and that allows us to again connect the community better through there, and along the old corridor of 84, turn that into more of an urban boulevard, extend fast track to the east, have more pedestrian and bike friendly crossings and amenities throughout there. And then as we follow that out further to the east, we have how we then, by moving the interstate out of this corridor, we get to free up the Bulkley Bridge for its, the historic Bulkley Bridge for its original use of being much more of a local connection between Hartford and East Hartford. And this also connects to the riverfront, and how down the River Gateway area, we are looking at a new bridge crossing there in the south that would look to connect the Whitehead Highway with East River Drive. And by lowering Interstate 91, we'd be able to make better connections into the river while still maintaining the flood protection, and having some local connections above the highway. The next, then with all of this, there's the importance of the transit initiative. This is important, as we heard a lot of feedback about how we needed to make transit more competitive, that in competitive way, so that it was time competitive, it was reliable, it was that it was comfortable. It was something that had amenities that was make it much more of a competitive option to other forms that people are taking now. We talked, you see here, kind of going from the upper left to the lower right is the fast track corridor we spoke about. Those dashed lines are rapid routes corridors that would be bus priority corridors that would look at these high use areas. They actually will kind of follow the same paths as it used to be the trolley system. Another transit initiative is a bus shelter enhancement program that's looking at, in cooperation and consultation with the city, looking at roughly 100 different bus stop locations and improving them. We're initiating a Blue Hills Avenue pilot right now. And throughout, we're also looking at a number of service plan improvements. Let's see if I can find some of those here. Looking at in the near term, looking at expanding night and Sunday service on about 23 Connecticut Transit routes and 8 Connecticut Fast Track routes, extending service all day, 7 days a week, including nights on Route 54, which goes from downtown to the Amazon Fulfillment Center, and Route 55, which goes from downtown Hartford to downtown Middletown. Another one is looking at trying to achieve 20-minute headways 7 days a week on the Route 24 connection between Windsor Locks Railroad Station and Bradley. Some of the other longer term improvements will require more of a comprehensive service analysis and also some capital improvements to the bus storage facilities. We also looked at trying to do some bus hubs. We have, there's been some stuff that the city's been doing at looking at a bus hub down there near Main Street, and also having one down by Union Station. Again, moving on to the next slide here, we know this is important because 1/3 of the Hartford residents do not own a car. This program will see a significant increase in the number of jobs that would be accessible by transit in the build condition. And, some of those numbers there are about 10% more within a 15-minute travel time and 25% more within a 30-minute travel time. So this kind of wraps it up in the big picture of the big picture of the components of this network. We have these areas being kept. We have better city connectivity. We have better local connectivity across the river. We have better connectivity to the river, and all gaining these mobility goals that we were looking for, while also focusing on that connectivity, restitching the city, and achieving those goals of a better quality of life. So right now we presently have a mode split that is heavily favors the single occupancy vehicle. The investment that we're looking to make in this program tries to tip that balance. We're putting much more of that into to rail and transit, and in reconnecting the city through the capping and urban design and the improvements to the local roads. And what does this do? So, this congested traffic through this network in the highways correlates to higher admissions, and in looking at the congestion reduction that we're getting in this build condition, you can see in the isochrones over there on the left, which each one of those rings kind of represents a different 5-minute interval of how fast you can get from the center of the travel time, from the center of that area. And in the build condition, we're looking at a 34% increase, or about in that area that you see outlined by that red line in both of those drawings. It changes to you get an increase of about 93,000 people that can be within 15 minutes of the center of that isochrone. And with that, with the full build, the freeway, the vehicle miles travel slightly increase because there is a little bit longer route to take versus the existing condition. But there is, because of removing the congestion, there is a reduction of, approximately 10,000 vehicle hours traveled. And those vehicle hours are really a stronger correlation to the emissions than the vehicle's mile travel. So our next steps, I indicated we are looking at, we have started moving projects ahead, and they will have some individual outreach. We will also have a coordinated outreach on the old program. And as the larger core components are ready to move forward, they will go through a environmental review process through the NEPA process. And that will, again, continue public outreach. We will get more input on the more details. We will have more detailed environmental analysis that will speak to the different potential impacts that could happen to both the built and natural environment. We'll continue to work with the city to see that we have the best mobility plan we can have.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Gale, I know you've always wanted this presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to ask some questions that fits within the parameters right now. And thank you, Mr. Burnham. My very first question is you've talked about the outreach, and I'm aware of it. I can remember back, as you said, back in 2013, I can remember DOT coming and making presentations to the West End Civic Association about at that time there were three considerations for burying the viaduct, lowering it to grade level, or just improving it as is. And I'm actually very pleased to see the growth of the project from its rather modest beginnings to a great plan for the entire region. But what I'm wondering is, in all of the outreach, I don't think the DOT has ever come directly to City Council before, and I don't know if that's by design. I don't know when you have these projects in various towns, if you go directly to the town council, to the whatever form of government each of our individual towns have. But I've been on City Council now for 10 years, and we have never received this presentation that you made tonight. We've requested it several times. I know I've requested it, but I'm just wondering what the thought process there is, and in answering that, maybe you could just commit to continuing to keep us involved if that's within the parameters.
Yeah, well, again, we try to, throughout this process, we have had a number of public meetings where we've tried to, and the department tries to see that we reach out to all parties. Obviously being an executive agency, we also work with the chief elected official first and foremost, but we understand that there are, we do reach out to the whole community, and we hope to see everybody at the public events. And you can always, we are here now, and you can continue to request that, and we will try to meet those needs.
Yeah, I would like to request at least at a minimum an annual update, that it be put onto the DOT calendar, that at least annually you come before council, and probably specifically before this committee, the Planning, Economic Development, and Housing Committee of City Council. And hopefully I speak for my colleagues in that request. I think this is important stuff. We're some of the decision makers here, and many of the projects that you're talking about impact all manner of other projects that we're involved with and need to be knowledgeable of. And so let me talk to you a couple of those, because you mentioned complete streets. Hartford was one of the early communities in the state to adopt a complete streets policy. And I know you talked about the Pulaski, making the Pulaski Circle roundabout much safer. Interestingly, just 2 days ago, there was a rally in front of City Hall that the folks who came to demonstrate their concerns about issues wanted to not only demonstrate it to the city, but they wanted to then go to the state capitol. And they very quickly concluded that they could not walk from City Hall to the state capitol, because you really can't walk across the Pulaski Circle. So they had to take this circuitous route of going up Main Street, down Gold Street, and around. So I do hope that the improvements, at Pulaski Circle include better pedestrian access, better pedestrian crosswalks, so that you can, regardless of which direction you're coming from, you're able to navigate that. And kind of in keeping with the discussion of Pulaski Circle, we've had discussion here at City Council about getting more roundabouts in Hartford, and we've seen them in many of our surrounding communities. I know Glastonbury now has several roundabouts in town, and one of the intersections that we've talked about as a good candidate in our thought process was Maine and Albany, but we've been told that's a state, and so we need to bring the state in on that. So you're here this evening. I saw the plans. They didn't look like you were showing a roundabout at the Five Corners there, but what is the potential for designing such a thing in the future at that intersection?
Well, at that intersection, that has been looked at, and there are a couple concerns about doing a roundabout there. Roundabouts can be very effective tools and very efficient with moving traffic. The problem is too, when you're in a network, you have to worry about the connection to up and downstream intersections. And the analysis that came out of the project development unit was that there was going to be some concerns that it was going to lock up the intersection, downstream to the east. Also, they're not necessarily, as you know, from Pulaski Circle isn't a modern roundabout by any means, but that there, a lot of the considerations about moving through the Albany and Maine intersection have to do with pedestrians and bikes, and not always the best solution when you're talking about such a large roundabout that would be necessary and probably very oddly shaped. So it is, we do have a roundabout committee at DOT that looks at these things, very seriously, because you have seen throughout the state that we have been very active in trying to put roundabouts wherever possible. We don't really feel that this is the right location for a roundabout.
Well, I hope it gets continued study. I've seen. I've personally had the occasion to ride a bicycle through roundabouts in Barcelona, Spain, that were considerably larger than Albany and Maine, and yet everybody seemed to move through there safely and efficiently. So, perhaps there are designs that work. In any event, I'm one voice that will keep it on your radar to some degree. There are other plans that we've seen and heard about that have been put forward by the iQuilt, and I'm wondering to what extent there's coordination with what you've presented here this evening with the plans that iQuilt has put forward to the community.
Well, we have been coordinating with development services and their efforts with iQuilt on a number of projects with the Heartline and the river, what's it called, the Riverlink, as well as other things. They were involved as a stakeholder in our discussions of the core program, and fundamentally with a lot of the things that they were looking at are really part of the plan in terms of a lot of the things with the river connections, and a lot of elements are very much consistent with what is going on.
So, one of the things you mentioned was the Heartline, and the Heartline. Let me just describe it a little bit in case folks aren't familiar with it. Is to my understanding anyway, designed to deal with the corridor from at least Bloomfield Center along an existing rail line down past the University of Hartford, Weaver High School, Annie Fisher, and then come right along Homestead Avenue and right into downtown. And I think iterations of it show it even extending from downtown to the river and maybe even across. But dealing with that corridor from Bloomfield to downtown along that existing rail line, that is a rail line that at one point in time was under serious consideration for development as a light rail system to Bradley. In the proposals I've seen from iQuilt, it seems that many of their discussions talk about removing the rail line. You've talked about mobility and moving people, and it certainly strikes me that moving people by rail is something that we don't have very much of around here, and perhaps could use more of. So I've been a little skeptical of plans that call for eliminating rail, maybe changing it up, maybe designing it to be more of a tram system, but eliminating seems to be going in an opposite direction. And you also mentioned in your presentation, and I'd like some clarification on this, some connection from Windsor Locks to Bradley by rail, if I'm not mistaken. So it sounds as though DOT is thinking about a rail connection to Bradley, but it's going through Windsor Locks. So do I have that rail connection right? And what's your thought about the Heartline rail connection?
So let's start with the Bradley. The Bradley is making a bus connection between the rail station and Bradley Airport. When we look at there's a couple things when you look at Bradley Airport and how the connectivity of where people are coming to the airport from, it's reaching, a lot from other areas of the state and out of state as well. And so the rail connection really isn't necessarily the best way to get everybody in this passenger shed that really wants to get to that airport. And having we do already have a rail line up there in the Hartford line, and using a more efficient and flexible bus connection has been thought to be the way to go now. As for the Heartline, the other thing that we did talk about when we talked about mobility was it's mobility of people and goods, and the rail corridor there is a active freight corridor. The service is not very frequent, but it still is something that does have to go through a process, and the people on that line and the people who operate that line and have access to the line do have certain rail freight rights. So that's one thing. That's why we've had a lot of these discussions of how to make this a rail with trail, and then in the pinch points find ways around it. So those have been those discussions.
Thank you for your comments. I know I've utilized a lot of time, Madam Chair, and thank you for that. I yield at this point. I'm happy to come back with another question or two.
Okay, now Councilman Mitchum, can we get to your resolution once this item is on the agenda, sir?
Well, I have a couple questions for Mr. Burnham as well, because it's relevant to this.
Please go right ahead, sir.
Thank you for the presentation. I have some questions first about the outreach that you've done. How much of that was in Spanish?
I will, I'm going to introduce here, because he's been through more of the process here. I'm going to introduce Casey Harden, who has been the consultant project manager or deputy project manager for the entirety of this project. I know we've had a lot of our materials translated into Spanish, and I know we've had some translations at meetings in Spanish, but Casey might be able to, put more.
Yeah.
Closer.
No, I mean, you hit the big thing was that all of our printed materials, we always had copies of in Spanish in addition to English. in terms of advertising, every time we put in an advertisement for public outreach, whether it be for a meeting or to drive people to the website, we ran it in Laveau's in addition to the Hartford Current and other English newspapers. There was a phase of the project where we were trying to drive people to that collaboration portal. We did some radio spots. We did a host of stations. One of them was La Bamba. So yeah, I mean, that's also that. So those are the sort of extra things we did beyond the sort of standard federal policy of we provide the notification, people can officially request translation, but we were always prepared. And for the duration of the project, the man who led the engagement outreach was a guy named Kevin Rivera. He's fluent. He's born in Hartford, so he was with us at every event and a couple times conversed with some attendees.
Thank you. And what, in terms of the outreach, what percentage of the folks that you connected with, if you know, were from household, that 30% of the city that doesn't have cars? And what steps did you take to connect with people who don't have cars?
I don't know if I have that number. I can speak to, I will also introduce, if, let's see, we got here, I see Denise.
This is
Well,
Janice here as
Oh,
well.
you're up there, like in the corner. I was seeing the wrong corner. Hi, Janice, there you go.
Good. I want to go back to Councilman Mitchum's question in terms of the outreach piece. I think you're asking a critical question around translation. And I think this is why the partnership in terms of outreach works with our work with AECOM and the Voices of Women of Color really works. As you know, we deal more on the grassroots level. And because we wanted to make sure with our involvement in outreach in phase 2 and phase 3, we didn't do it in silos. And so what I mean by that is we was very conscious about the translation, is specifically around the Northeast area where Carabetta communities are, and it's heavily populated all around Quirk School. And so we partnered with BLM 860 and actually had Evelise lead the door-to-door outreach specifically with Latinos to talk to them in Spanish about that project. In addition to that, whenever we have a pop-up, councilman, and we're out and about, whether it's the jazz festival doing outreach, whether it's the tables, whether it's our house parties, we are always equipped to have translation. It is something that I am adamant about. It is, and while we're here, I want to thank Madam Chair Shirley Surgeon, Councilwoman Marilyn Rossetti, and I know Councilman TJ Clark isn't here, along with our state representatives who have attended several of our house parties. And so, yes, Councilman, I just wanted to kind of, because AECOM and the Voices of Women of Color work at different capacities and different levels in the community in terms of outreach. So yes, we've partnered with them. We've also partnered with the KCC Center to ensure that we was getting the information to those who are of our LGBTQ plus community, because we recognize that they take public transportation. We also partnered with Hartford Parents University, Mini Arciega, so we can get the message out to many of those Latino families and parents who deal with public transportation, because it was critical and important to us to be able to gather the information, not just on highways and byways, but on pedestrian crossing, uh, what role would what CT Transit play in it. And Councilman Gale touched on some critical points that the community was raising in terms of what does it mean around the railroad track. What is the correlation between the iQuilt program and the work DOT is doing? And so we have heard from your constituents, and we have also provided them access for translation. It's very critical for the voices of women of color. Thanks for the question, Councilman.
Thank you, Janice. Councilman Mitchum.
Thank you, and thank you for that answer, Janice.
Charlie.
I want to actually turn back to, I assume this is a question for Mr. Burnham because it's a little more to the substance of the plan.
Okay.
But I mean, anybody can answer me. Most of you know more than me. In describing the plan in the presentation, there's obviously like the highway capping, sort of the big money part of it. And then you talked, Mr. Burnham, about a lot of like, we're looking into service improvements in this bus line and that bus line and, in the handful of rapid bus lines. It was a little unclear to me, like what is promised and what is just hoped for. Because, I mean, most recently what the city has seen is some reductions in bus service, to Southwest. And so, like, I know you mentioned the 55 to Middletown, and I think the 54, and then you talked about sort of we're looking at other things. How much of that is actually for sure going to happen, or it's just sort of like we're looking at it?
Well, again,
service.
Sure. The biggest things right now that need to take place for that to happen, two things. One is that, this was a very broad, high-level study. So they need to have a more detailed, comprehensive service analysis that, goes with its own outreach and digging into the customers. So that is something that will happen. What comes of that is something that, the Bureau of Public Trans would have to speak to more than I would. And another little bit of a kind of a sticking point is that their storage facilities for the buses are basically at capacity. So they are actively looking for and going to have projects to expand that capacity, whether it is in a single location or satellite locations. But that is a problem that for certain routes where they don't, where they're not already running at capacity for stores, say like on some expanding some night routes, that would be an easier thing that they could do now. But if there's something where there's already don't have the buses to fit in the facility right now, that has to wait till the infrastructure, which again they're actively working on improving, gets completed.
Well, so let me ask you, right? Like, I'll just use an example. The north end right now is not connected to the fast track, right? Like in the way that much of the, the south end and the sort of central part of the city are. Is that in the cards? Because, and when I say in the cards, like you talked about, like something that would be easier would be increasing night service. Something that would be easier. Like I want to know what is actually going to happen versus we're going to do this highway improvement and maybe you'll get more bus service. I want to know what's concrete and we're looking at it.
Well, again, what you see that what we've talked about here as far as the priority corridors are moving forward, the shelter enhancement program is going forward, the bus service improvements that I've spoken about earlier, those ones that I identified, those are things that are moving forward. The routes beyond that, I would really have to have the Bureau of Public Trans go into more detail with you, because I really don't want to speak for them other than like where I know that they have to go into a more detailed service analysis. I don't know if there's anything else case
I could
study.
add, Kevin, if you want. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm thinking just of mentioning and they're not located in the city, but these two mobility hubs that are planned. One is in Manchester in the vicinity of Buckland. The other is it Spencer Street, just over the line into Manchester. Why is that important? One of the challenges with these suburban employment centers is that it's really difficult if you don't have a car, you live in Hartford, to get out there. The bus drops you somewhere. It's really difficult to make that a viable commute. And so these mobility hubs are going to help people make that last mile connection. They're going to make for a more seamless bus service. So in addition to what Kevin mentioned, those are actual capital projects that are slated, that are in the design process and headed towards capital construction very shortly.
Let me interrupt. I don't know if I'm interrupting, but let me ask. A mobility hub in the suburbs only solves the last mile problem, unless I'm misunderstanding. Like, it solves the last mile problem for the people in the suburbs, right? If I live in Hartford and I don't have a car and I have a job, somewhere in Manchester or Vernon or wherever, a big place where people can park in Manchester by a mobility hub, where does that get me?
Well, my thought was it helps you get to the job. On the North Hartford side, we've got both Albany Avenue and North Main Street slated as the transit priority corridors. And that would essentially serve as a higher quality of service that functions at the level of CT Fast Track nearly, where you'd have the higher frequencies, less time to wait, and more of the information that's provided, some of those higher level amenities that don't exist. So each of those corridors is slated for like that type of sort of on-street bus rapid transit type service.
All right, this is my last question. So then I do want to call on Chance Carter from Planning and Zoning. But you mentioned, Mr. Burnham, I think the highway construction is going to increase, it's going to decrease congestion, but it's going to increase the number of vehicle miles traveled, the number of cars passing through. And that's, the vast majority of this spending, right? Like, I think it was around 50% from my recollection of that slide. I mean, yeah, that one. I guess it's just shy of 50%. Is that advancing the project of moving the region to less driving, or of serving the needs of a city that doesn't have cars in the quantity that its neighbors have, if what we're doing is fundamentally spending the most money here on putting more cars on the highway?
Well, again, so a couple of things on the funding side. When you talk about when you look at this chart, the stuff that's going to the actual interstate is less than 30%. I mean, there are a lot of parts that we have in terms of the largest section there is dealing with the capping, which is making these local connections above and supporting the connectivity of the city. And some of what the dealing with the congestion, and we're talking about some, when you look at the highway and how the highway is aligned now, and that we have certain choke points of poor design, where the interchange is now there at the Bulkley Bridge. We have very tight ramps that are not meeting design standards, and by moving that to a place where we can have a proper system interchange and freeing up that Bulkley Bridge for other uses, putting the highway as much as necessary underground, or capped over. This is going to allow for these other connections, and and it unlocks it. What moving the highway does is unlocks a lot of other possibilities to get all the other features that deal with the active transportation and the transit and the connecting communities, that leaving it in place is really impossible to do. And it doesn't meet the mobility needs either, keeping it in place. So it's really kind of a key to unlocking other things. And there's a large amount of other investment. Two-thirds of better than two-thirds of the other investment is going into those, to improve great advances in the rail alignment and getting more frequent service and faster service. Other transit improvements, improving and getting the busway across into the east. Many local road improvements, and so I do see that where we get the vehicle miles is that takes a little bit more circuitous route and adds a little bit of mileage. You don't see it really here well on the map because it kind of goes into the area there, but you're adding some mileage, but by freeing up that congestion, you're having less vehicle hours traveled, and along with that, that's more likely a correlation with the emissions. I don't know if that entirely answered what you were looking for, but.
Oh, that was pretty good. I appreciate it. I won't ask any more questions. I do want to call, and I thank the council president for allowing me to do this. I want to call on Chance Carter, who's on our planning and zoning commission, and who also just has a lot of professional and personal knowledge about this. Just to weigh in, because it was really he who pushed me to look at this more. So I would call on him to give some comments.
Sure, Councilman Mitchum. And Mr. Carter, again, welcome. Nice to see you. I remember when we appointed you to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So out of respect, welcome back to the City Council Committee. Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Councilman, especially for introducing this resolution, and thank you to the committee for giving me some time to speak tonight. I won't take up much of your time. I would like to also thank Mr. Burnham for his presentation. I think one thing that I really want to highlight, which is something that Councilman Gale actually spoke to, is it's scary to me, and I'm saying this as an independent resident, so the Planning and Zoning Commission is an independent place and they are doing their own thing. I'm here as my own person. And one of the other hats that I wear is as second vice chair of the Connecticut Public Transportation Council. And luckily, in that role, we're able to have a lot more interface with DOT than what y'all have been able to get. Granted, we've been talking to folks on the Bureau of Public Transportation, which I would urge y'all to connect with as well, because I do think that Hartford, being one of the main spots in the state that relies on transit and has such a car-free and car-light number of households, most of my neighbors, rely on walking and transit to get around up here in Blue Hills. I think it's really important that y'all get updates from the state so that way we get a bit more coordination for residents, so that way it's easier for folks to figure out who they should be reaching out to about what and when. I do appreciate the investment that the state is looking to make into the city and to the region. As a lifelong Hartfordite, I did grow up with asthma, which I'm sure was courtesy of, over 200,000 vehicles traversing through the middle of the city. And I was looking forward to seeing what the state had planned to try to alleviate that while still trying to make sure that we don't end up choked with traffic in the process. As we've looked at the mobility study, I've had some concerns, even going through Mr. Burnham's report, looking at specifically the Albany and Main intersection and the improvements that are being proposed there. One thing that astounds me is that if we've looked at the Rapid Ride study, which the Capital Region Council of Governments completed a few years ago, they identified some of the main bus routes in the city, which serve roughly 46% of the monthly ridership on CT Transit without looking at express routes. So that would be looking at both local and looking at Connecticut Fast Track. When we look at that, we see that some of the recommendations that are called for include bus lanes, transit signal priority, things that pretty much help the buses move through traffic and around traffic, and also help to appeal to motorists that do have the option to use transit, that it might actually get them to their destination faster. For example, at the intersection of Albany and Main at peak times, there's a bus that stops at that intersection at least once every 5 minutes. But yet, when we look at the proposed improvements, there isn't much there when it comes to actually enhancing transit service there. Yes, we see bike lanes, but we see nothing to help with getting buses through that intersection. In fact, we see a reduction in lanes, which is actually going to have the buses stuck in the same traffic that drivers are in. If we live in a city where we have a majority of residents that rely on transit, we should be trying to advocate for them to get through the city, because if folks can get through the city faster, then they'll be able to move through our region faster. And if we want to be a hub for the city and attract development, attract residents, and ensure that the residents that we have can have adequate transit, then I just would urge that we get a bit more coordination, and hopefully through this committee and through council that can happen. The other thing that I would like to note is just that as we're looking at bus service enhancements and bus service proposed reductions, I would like to note that coming up on in 2 weeks, we actually do have a meeting that's going to be held at the Park Street Library, where they will be discussing the proposed bus service changes. The date for that is actually, hang on here. It's on Wednesday, March 19th at 5:30 to 7:30, and it's at the Park Street Library. So that way, folks, both here at this committee and residents, can take a look at the changes and speak to folks from CT Transit and the Bureau of Public Transportation. One thing that I hope that the committee will advocate against with these changes is the reduction of service on Route 63, which would reduce service to both Southwest Hartford and service to the Hartford Housing Authority main office, which will result in folks having to walk. And yes, it might be a quarter mile, but as we know with the weather that's coming through tonight, folks don't necessarily want to do that in the rain and snow. So I would just urge that folks turn out on March 19th and give their opinions. And with that, I thank you for your time, and we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chance.
Madam Chair, may I,
1 second, Ms. Fleming.
okay.
Just 1 second. One of the things I was going to ask you is since you sit on the transit committee, I think you said.
Yes, ma'am. It's the Connecticut Public Transportation Council.
Okay, all right. Okay, so maybe you can help us if we want to invite the Bureau of Public Transit so we can gather more information.
I can make that connection. I meet with them monthly.
All right, so I'll have my assistant reach out to you. All right, you know Sadea, right?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Ms. Fleming, go right ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Carter, for your remarks. And that's where the Voice is housed and do a lot of our work and host our house parties. And a lot of our house parties and at the public meeting, I just wanted to give you this information because it was a little different than what we were hearing and seeing and what we see on the ground, to kind of help you hear some of the things DOT was hearing as well. A lot of people, and I think this is important in this space because it's a matter of municipality, was concerned about not having parking for their cars in North Hartford. And I think Madam President Shirley Surgeon was at one of the house parties when this conversation got really going.
Yep.
And so I also want you to know that I live in Blue Hills and there's a whole population of people who do drive and cannot find parking outside of their apartment buildings. But the Hartford Parking Authority keeps billing them because they have apartment buildings without driveways.
Yeah.
The North Hartford is unique, as you know, because you live in Blue Hills, where this was a predominantly Jewish community. So some of the parcels that lie in our communities do not have lots. And so, what people were complaining about, quite frankly, is how do we continue to have bike lanes when we don't have parking, right? Which became this really interesting conversation about what people needs were. And so I want to tell you that it's this is why this has been so really important work for us. We heard about on a municipal level with Captain Steve Harris about how the sticks, what we're designing, what we're putting, some things from the city is causing a struggle to mobilize. These are all things and information we've been able to present to DOT. So I want to just share with you, and this is why it was important to us to partner with different organizations and build on our base to hear all of these different voices. Because depending on the community, the needs is different. And we heard a lot more about people being concerned where they park and how that relates to having bike lanes. So thank you so much. I just thought I would share that because I remember council president was at that particular house party when this big conversation was discussed. So I wanted to share that with you as well. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Janice. And I do have to concur this. I was there and I do have lots of my residents. I live on a street which is multifamily, majority multifamily homes. And if you have 2 cars or 1 cars, there is no parking. It's off the street parking. So yeah, we do have some of those concerns, especially in Upper Albany, that I would like to address. But now, if there are any other questions, questions on the resolution, Councilman Gale and then Councilman Hernandez.
Well, I'm happy to defer to Councilman Hernandez, who hasn't had an opportunity yet at all.
Well, I mean, my comments will be more of comments to kind of like get us to a closing statement here.
All right, well then I'll ask my
Right.
question. I'll ask my questions and
Yeah.
defer to you. Just a couple of comments back for Mr. Burnham and the team. I want to say that I very much appreciate the DOT's planning, as demonstrated by that pie graph that shows the 44% being concerned with the urban areas of the city as opposed to the highways, et cetera. Yeah, that one, the capping and urban design. And I don't know, the extent that people appreciate that this design is going to capture back for Hartford incredible amounts of land. Mr. Burnham, I think you do yourself a disservice by not counting that point home as to how many acres of land we're going to recover. And I think it's equally, so almost more important for East Hartford, which is going to have dramatic increase in usable land area. And I think for the city of Hartford, these are very important things. I mean, this is land that's very valuable. This is land that can be developed. It's some of the land in these areas is the land that pays the highest tax brackets of any land in the entire city. So for us to recover some of that land and to be able to build on it is it's a huge thing, and I very appreciative that the design has gone in that direction as this thing has evolved. But to Councilman Mictum's point, what's concrete and what's not. I think we'd like to keep our finger on the pulse here to see, where do all these great plans go, and what will ultimately happen. And my last little pitch is going to be back to the rail concept. You know, and I heard the comment, I think from Mr. Harden, about getting people to and from the airport. But to me, the other aspect of rail to and from the airport, or rail period, is that rail can be an economic development generator. I don't, you know, I get I get the pitch that we're not going to be moving maybe so many people to and from the airport, you know, from the farther the distance that they come, et cetera. But boy, if you, I can only imagine if we had done that Griffin line in 1996, the amount of economic development that there would be along that Griffin line today from Bradley into Hartford would, you know, to me would be astounding. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do think studies bear that out. So, you know, I would encourage DOT to keep that economic development along rail lines, just like the economic development that's occurring along the fast track, which, you know, certainly folks poo-pooed the fast track when it was proposed, but you know, it's worked. There is economic development. These things do work. I mean, it's not overnight, but it works. And just to drop a bee in your bonnet with respect to the what remains of the Griffin line through Bloomfield, I talked to the operator of that line to ask him what it would take to do a demonstration commuter project there. And he indicated that for $10,000, he could bring a commuter car, a self-propelled commuter car on the existing line. And he could run that thing for, this astounded me as well, $150 a week rent for that car. Now, that doesn't cover the operating costs, but it sounds to me like for a very modest amount of money, we could actually get a demonstration project and see who would use a rail line from Bloomfield Center, you know, stopping at the University of Hartford and maybe Albany and Homestead and Walnut. I don't know. Anyway, I just leave you with that comment, and I defer to Councilman Hernandez.
Then after Councilman Hernandez, Councilwoman Rosado.
Sure. So, thank you, Madam President. So I was trying to, you know, kind of align all these conversations, right, with the resolution, so we can, you know, at some point, you know, determine, you know, how to move forward with this resolution. And I was looking at the first resolve that has 5 points, and it is to a certain degree. I find that many, if not all, of those 5 points have been met already. But perhaps there have been additional conversations or additional points that have come up during this conversation that, you know, perhaps we will like to inquire a little bit more, or perhaps, you know, have an additional conversation in the future, because it does brought some additional conversations that are beyond the scope of what this resolution was asking for. But to begin, it is, in my view and my opinion, that those 5 points on that first resolved have been satisfied already with the work that DOT did in the community, the different studies and the different conversations. Again, not to say that there are no additional concerns that maybe perhaps came up during this conversation, but that are beyond the scope of this resolution. So I wanted to kind of like put it out there as the way I'm seeing it. And you know, if anybody else thinks otherwise, then I'm more than happy to hear that. But that's how I wanted to kind of like get us to a point where we can then say, okay, what are we doing now? Because the way that the resolution is written, you know, you know, it's well intended, but I think that this presentation has really kind of answered most of those items. But again, it's open-ended for some other additional concerns that maybe we would like to discuss in the future. And I don't know in what format we will have those discussions, but at the very least, you know, I feel like the resolution itself, the way it's right now, I think it's been met to my view. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Before you, Councilman Mitchell, Councilwoman Rosado had her hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to echo, you know, a lot of what Councilman Gale said. You know, I'm all for transparency, and I want to commend Ms. Fleming and the Voices of Women of Color for the way that they have disseminated this information out to the public. I sit on the city council. I have a full-time job. I have my family, and sometimes it is so difficult to keep up with everything that's going on. And I say this because through their newsletter, when they put out the mobility study, I was able on my leisure at my time, swipe up and down on my phone and read it. Okay. And that's very important for single women, for moms, in order to be able to keep up of what's going on within the city. I just texted Ms. Fleming because I know that there's a need in the South End for her to come out and talk to a lot of our residents who still don't have this information and still don't even know what's going on. And to me, that's very important to get it out to what I call, the Spanish community. So I'm looking forward, Ms. Fleming, getting in contact with you and perhaps having a flyer sent out and having this meeting at the Coyote Flaco, which we've had community meetings there that have been so successful. And for Councilman Mitchum for putting this resolution together. I think it's been very informative, and to also see DOT present in front of council. So I thank you both, and Ms. Fleming, I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
I do as well. Thank you very much. And I want to thank Councilman Mitchum as well. I thought it was critical to spark a conversation. Like I said, our style, I'm sure Denise is on here. All of you have been invited to our house parties to have these discussions. I do understand Councilman Gale wanting DOT to go before the council, and it was your resolution that brought us together. But I also think it's important too for the council members to sit with the community and hear some of that in North Hartford. Um, and so we welcome you and we invite you. It's the last Sunday of every month. It's different events. Councilman Gale, I just got to meet your sister. She attended our last house party about the superintendent, wonderful lady. And so we welcome you all. We're going to continue the conversation. And so we hope to see you at one of the house parties.
Thank you.
You again.
You're welcome. Councilman Mitchum.
Thank you, Madam President. And I'm going to see if I can bring us to conclusion here. And I just want to, you, Council President, suggested to me as a Councilman Gale via text during this, that we postpone this to, Councilman Gale said to hear from someone from the Bureau of Public Transit. I think also to address Councilman Hernandez's point. Well, I'm not entirely convinced that the points that are resolved are fully addressed. I think I would suggest that we don't get rid of the resolution. Maybe we need to change the resolution, but it is a good vehicle, as I think Ms. Fleming said. It's a good vehicle for these conversations, so I would move to postpone it and see if we can't, at our next meeting, get more information from more sources about these issues, and maybe in the interim also have some conversations about whether we want to agree on some changes to the resolution. So I move to postpone.
I second it.
Right. The motion on the floor was to postpone the item. It was properly second. Is there any discussion? My discussion is Mr. Burnham for coming and doing the presentation for us. I be honest with you, I've seen this presentation too many different times. Okay. And I want to thank Ms. Fleming to inviting me to her home. And I don't want to come anymore regarding this mobility study. I think I'm good. It gave me an opportunity to also hear from the residents, in North Hartford regarding parking and those issues that we need to address.
And excuse me, Council President, and especially Ms. Fleming, Butler Fleming, when it's about 100 degrees, but that's another story. Go ahead.
Exactly. So we're not coming, but she does provide food and beverages. So we do have to give her that much when we show up for a meeting. So the motion was to postpone. It's been properly second. Those in favor to postpone the item?
Aye.
Any opposition? Seeing none, any abstention? There is none. This item is going to be postponed, and we're going to reach out to Mr. Carter and get some help in inviting the public state of Connecticut. What is it called again? The
Bureau of Public
Bureau of
Transit.
Public Transit. Yes. All right. Seeing that we have no other item on the agenda, I recommend that we call this meeting to be adjourned.
We'll accept that recommendation.
You're quite welcome, Councilman Gill. Everyone for attending.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.